far away to the east, where the sun blazes down like a huge red jewel over the glaring white cities, there lived long ago two brothers called Qasim and Ali Baba. Qasim was a rich merchant, but Ali Baba was as poor as a church mouse. He was just able to support his family by gathering dry sticks to sell as firewood. One day his work took him far beyond the city where the sand and scorched rocks of the desert begin. He was just tying the last armful of sticks up in his bundle when he heard in the distance the thunder of a great troop of horses. Ali Baba hid himself in the bushes and waited to see what would happen. A band of robbers came riding up in a cloud of dust. Not counting their leader, there were exactly 40 of them. They leapt down from their horses and gathered around one of the rocks, and in a fearful voice, their leader called out, "Open sesame!" In the twinkling of an eye, the rock face opened up before them, and the robbers poured into a secret cave. Ali Baba waited and watched. After a while, the rocks began opening up. The robbers came out, mounted their horses, and galloped off. Ali Baba could not contain his curiosity. He went up to the cliff and called out, "Open sesame!" To his surprise, the hard stone wall parted to let him into an exquisite cave filled with gold and precious stones. The cliff face crushed shut behind him. Ali Baba was dazzled by the beauty and richness of what he saw, but he wasted no time, caught up as much gold and jewels as he could carry, and ordered the rocks to release him again. He shoved the treasure into his bundles of firewood, loaded them onto his donkey, and hurried home. His wife could not believe her eyes when she saw the riches he had brought. She ran off at once to her sister-in-law, Qasim's wife, to borrow a grain measure in order to measure their new-found wealth. But Qasim's wife was curious to know why the poor folk needed a grain measure when they scarcely had enough to keep body and soul together. So she spread a little honey on the bottom of the measure. When she got the measure back again, she found a tiny gold coin stuck to the honey. As soon as Qasim heard from his wife that Ali Baba the pauper had been using a grain measure to take stock of his gold coins, he went off and demanded that his brother should tell him where he had come by such wealth. The good-hearted Ali Baba told him everything, and the greedy Qasim rode off at once towards the secret cave. "Open sesame!" he called out to the rock face, and it opened to let him in. The miserly merchant could not bring himself to go away and leave such treasures. He played with the twinkling gold pieces for so long that the robbers, returning to their cave, found him there and cut his throat. When Qasim did not return for a long time, Ali Baba went out to the rocks to look for him, but in the cave he found only his brother's lifeless body. Sadly, he slung the dead man over his donkey and carried him back to the city, where the family buried him. He and his wife and children then moved into his brother's house. Meanwhile, the robbers had returned to their cave from another expedition, and when they saw that Qasim's body had disappeared, they realized that someone else must know their secret. Their chieftain ordered one of his cutthroats to go into the city and find out who had dared to enter their cave. The robber stood in the marketplace asking questions, until at last he heard how a poor man called Ali Baba had recently buried his brother and had come by mysterious wealth. The robber made a chalk cross on the door of Ali Baba's house in order to report to his leader. But Ali Baba had a clever servant girl called Moragana. She noticed the chalk mark at once, and suspecting foul play, made crosses on all the doors in the street. When that night the robbers stole into the city, they could not find Ali Baba's house. The robber chieftain was so angry with the spy that he had the poor man's head cut off on the spot. The robbers' leader stayed behind in the city himself until he had again found the house he wanted. He went back to his men and ordered them to load 40 skins and jars onto a train of mules. He filled one of them with olive oil, but in each of the others he had hid one of his men. They agreed on a signal at which they would leap out to attack Ali Baba's house. Then the robber chief disguised himself as a merchant, made his way with his caravan to Ali Baba's house, and asked for a bed for the night. Ali Baba willingly took the stranger into his house. While they were talking together, the lamp in the kitchen went out, and the servant girl Moragana went to fill it with oil. She remembered that the merchant had left his jars of oil in the courtyard, and when she went up to them, the hidden robbers heard footsteps in the yard. They asked in a whisper, "Is it time, master?" The clever girl suspected a trap and whispered in a deep voice, "No, not yet." She felt the skins until she found the one which was full of oil, which she then boiled in a cauldron and poured into all the other vessels, scalding the robbers to death. Then she called the soldiers, who recognized the robber chief and executed him on the spot. Thus it was that once again the clever Moragana saved Ali Baba and his family, and he rewarded her richly for her courage and faithfulness.